coming to you from the festive city of board gaming, Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome to the Out of the Dust podcast. I'm your host, Spooky Bryce, and tied with the popular recurring Out of the Dust geek list on Board Game Geek, the Out of the Dust podcast is a bi-weekly podcast that is focused on re-exploring games we played that we hadn't previously played in a year or more. Why did the game get dusty? Why did you decide to dust it off? How does the game compare to how you remembered it? Are you likely to play it more often in the future? These are the questions that we're interested in examining on Out of the Dust. This week on the podcast, episode 75. On the Out of the Dust segment, I'll bring Evolution Out of the Dust, and a contributor will dust off both Castles of Mad King Ludwig and Ave Caesar. On the reaction segment, I discuss some recent crowdfunding news. On the What I've Been Playing segment, I review Bonfire. On the Up to Your Bryce game segment, I review Vault of Dragons. And we wrap up the episode by beginning a series of expansion reviews with Dinogenics Controlled Chaos. I had a chance to bring Evolution, the hit game for designers Dominique Crapuchet and Dimitri Knorre and Sergei Mashin and publisher North Star Games, Out of the Dust. I last played this modern classic tableau building game 4 years, 5 months, and 17 days ago. This is another one I was inspired to bring out for game school time after studying about structures of living organisms with the kids. Creating custom species, which are a combination of their various unique parts, illustrated this concept well for the kids, and they both had a blast with it. They've requested additional plays regularly since then, in fact, a positive reception for the game that was perhaps helped by their domination of their parents in the first game that we played. I've always had mixed feelings about the game personally, which is probably why it remained dusty for so long. I love the theme and the production is excellent, but I've always thought the tableau building left a little too much up to chance. But it's been hard not to get caught up in the kids' excitement, and all of our plays have been a delight. It's a well-paced game that doesn't wear out its welcome, and I've begun to appreciate this species customization and build-up more. Munching on helpless herbivores with a giant unstoppable carnivore is just as satisfying as watching a carnivore starve itself into extinction because it is powerless against a herbivore's defenses. I get the feeling Evolution will continue to hit the table regularly for the foreseeable future. Let's see what a contributor brought Out of the Dust. Murzum, username Murzum, brought a couple of modern classics of their own Out of the Dust. Murzum is playing through his collection alphabetically in an effort to decide which games to keep and which to let go. First up was the well-regarded race game Ave Caesar from designer Wolfgang Reitesser and publisher Asmodee. They last played it 3 years, 6 months, and 26 days ago, and currently rates it a 7 out of 10. Murzum writes, another one from our Mary Kondo cleanup, the A-Team. This is a heritage from my oldest brother, and at the time I thought it didn't spark joy, but now with the whole family playing together, we had a good time with a lot of blocking each other in the race. The 5-year-old daughter won the race. We'll stick to this one for a while, I guess. Murzum also got to play Castles of Mad King Ludwig, designer Ted Alspach and publisher Bezier Games' enduring tile-laying game, which Murzum last played 4 years, 5 months, and 26 days ago, and currently rates an 8.5 out of 10. Murzum writes, I played the solitaire version of this game twice again after we rediscovered Suburbia. For the same designer last month, my oldest son liked Suburbia a lot, but he didn't want to play this one with me yet. I do like it a lot, though, and hopefully I can get it played soon with my kids. Thanks for the contribution, Murzum. Sounds like a fun challenge you are undertaking. If I were to undertake this challenge myself, besides taking years and years to get through my collection, I'm not sure how many games I'd actually decide to part with. I feel like I'm pretty good at finding some kind of redeeming value in just about anything I play. Reaction segment time. This week on the reaction segment, I'm going to take a quick look at a bunch of crowdfunding news that has come down the pipe all at once. I'm calling this a crowdfunding update instead of a Kickstarter update because Hasbro is getting into the crowdfunding racket with their own custom platform that they are debuting the long out of print and eagerly anticipated by many HeroQuest on. Now this has hacked off some people because if there's any company that doesn't need to crowdfund for funds ahead of time, it's Hasbro. But I've got a different take on this. If it wasn't already clear that Kickstarter, and by extension its related sites, despite its own claims to the contrary, is indeed a store, it should be now. But this is not a hill to die on. It's time for everyone to let go of the noble idea that crowdfunding should only be for the little guy. Crowdfunding has grown and evolved over the years as a legitimate place to encompass and include everyone, and that's okay. People use it for different things and in different ways, and everyone is getting a piece of the pie. Now, if we ever get to the point where the big guys push out all the little guys, then we'll have a problem. But there's not even a hint or any remote danger of that at the moment. Speaking of alternative to Kickstarter crowdfunding methods, GameFound is getting in on the crowdfunding game. I find this very interesting because this is an organization that has a lot of positive things going for it, and I think if anyone is going to mount a successful challenge to Kickstarter, these guys have what it takes. If you weren't aware, GameFound is a pledge manager system that helps a lot of companies organize their pledges, process them, and does a lot of the behind-the-scenes logistical handling of the games themselves. With this system already in place and established relationships with companies already in place, GameFound can make a big splash and has the organization to offer up a solid, reputable alternative to Kickstarter. And I think that's the key ingredient that has been missing in challenges mounted by sites like Indiegogo in the past. Sites that just try to copy what Kickstarter was doing, like Indiegogo, only succeeded in setting themselves up as a poor man's alternative to turn to when Kickstarter denied or canceled a campaign for some reason or another. They've got kind of a shady reputation about them, and it's because of how companies have used them and because of how they came onto the scene. But GameFound can avoid that stigma because of its already respected reputation and by offering something different and beyond what Kickstarter can offer. I think that's going to be very attractive to companies, and there are already a lot of big names and major projects signing up with them. I don't think Kickstarter is going away anytime soon, but it's going to be interesting to see how these two companies fare in the coming years. And speaking of anticipated games crowdfunding, 7th Citadel released recently. I'm not personally going to back this one because I have plenty of content to explore already in 7th Continent, and the fantasy theme doesn't grab me as much as the historical one. But the game did catch my attention nonetheless because of a bit of controversy that has arisen concerning its box art. I can appreciate an immature joke as much as the next individual, so this controversy does amuse me. If you've not heard of this controversy yet, let's just say that the infamous box cover for World in Flames would fit in really well with 7th Citadel. I've got quite a bit more crowdfunding news to discuss, so I think I'll make this topic span 2 or 3 episodes this time. This week on the What I've Been Playing segment, I'm going to tell you about Bonfire, Stefan Feld's upcoming new game from publisher Pegasus Spiel. This is available at Tabletopia, and when a friend of mine offered to teach me it, I jumped at the chance. The bonkers theme of this one is worth reading from the BGG page. The bonfires are sources of light, energy, and warmth created by the Guardians of Light in order to brighten the cities on the otherwise dark planet. The residents of the cities, however, took the bonfires for granted and exploited them for their personal gain. Disappointed, the Guardians of Light retreated and let the bonfires extinguished. The citizens could no longer live in the now dark cities and were forced to leave. You are a group of gnomes living close to the cities, and you also need the light of the bonfires. Missing it now, you try yourself to visit the cities and learn how to ignite the bonfires once again. You must visit the Guardians of Light on their holy islands and ask for tasks to prove your goodwill. For each completed task, they will reignite one extinguished bonfire. Whoever manages to earn the greatest trust from the Guardians and manage to brighten their city the most will win the game. But, like any good Stefan Feld game, the theme isn't that important anyway. Here's how it works. On their turn, a player chooses one of 3 options. Option number 1 is to place a fate tile into their fate area. Fate tiles are 1x3 strips of 3 different colored squares, and when they place them into their fate area, which is a little puzzle element of the game, they take a matching action tile of the same color plus extra ones for creating chains of the same colored squares with their placement. Option number 2 is to use any number of the same colored action tiles for the corresponding action. These actions might enable a player to recruit a gnome card into their city, which is a little tableau building mechanism that grants players special or immediate abilities, sail their boat to a new island on the map, take a task tile, or retrieve a guardian beeple from the island where their boat is, extend the path around their player board for the Guardians to move on, visit the Great Bonfire, which grants them a certain combination of additional action tiles, resources, or portals, which are placed next to the Guardian path they are building. Whew! The Guardian path is connected to the portals, which are in turn connected to the spaces the task tiles are placed on. Task tiles are objectives, and when one of these has been fulfilled, players can choose option number 3 on their turn to flip the task tile to its bonfire side and send a novice meeple to the High Council, which grants the player an immediate benefit of some kind. Lit bonfires are worth points at the end of the game, and players can score even more points from bonfires by moving guardians next to them with a procession action. When a certain number of player count-dependent total novices are in the High Council, a countdown timer begins and players play 5 more rounds. At the end of the game, besides scoring bonfire and guardian points, players also score points for having portals next to lit bonfires, path tiles being next to same-colored bonfires, communal tasks, leftover fate tiles, and leftover action tiles and resources. Obviously, with a description like that, you can tell there's a lot of delicious point salad options in the game. You won't have any doubt recognizing it as a Feld game while you play, which is a good thing. It's got that Feldian feel to it, and I enjoyed it a lot. The mechanism of placing fate tiles and gaining action tiles for their colors placed and matched up is really interesting. Because players are limited in the order they bring the randomly arranged tiles into play, there's a really engaging puzzle involved in the game in trying to get the most bang for one's action tile buck with the actions and quantities of actions that are granted and when. There's a lot of tactical timing decisions to make due to this mechanism and a lot of adaptive strategy required to be successful. 2 things you know I like a lot. I've actually been hesitant to play any complete game on Tabletopia up to this point because an interface like that is pretty tedious to use and manipulate. So it took a Feld game to finally tip me over the edge, and the quality of this particular Feld game is going to keep me coming back to this site for more. Because it looks like it's going to be another couple of months or so before the game enjoys a North America release. If Bonfire and the inevitable Castles of Tuscany both release before the end of the year on time, that would be a real nice way for 2020 to end on a high note. Obscure Bryce game segment time. This week on the segment, I'm going to tell you about Vault of Dragons, a 2018 D&D themed adventure game from publisher Gale Force 9 and designer Aaron Dill, who has designed credits on all of Gale Force 9's games. Vault of Dragons is a re-implementation of Sons of Anarchy, and it's surprising that the game has flown under the radar so much since its release, considering its IP and designer and publisher pedigree. D&D has been successfully adapted to board games so often that despite having never played the classic RPG myself, I do pay attention to the board game iterations and have enjoyed all of them that I've been exposed to without exception. I tend to like most of Gale Force 9's games, though I think they tend to last a little longer than necessary, so I put Vault of Dragons on my wish list when it came out, though at a low priority want. The game connected with me in a math trade earlier in the year, which is precisely how I wanted to acquire the game. One of the unfortunate characteristics of Gale Force 9 is that their rulebooks, while comprehensive, are often longer than needed and the rule sets filled with edge cases and nuances. So it took a while for the game to hit my table after acquiring it, but do so it finally did. Here's how it works. Players are various factions in the famous city of Waterdeep, hoping to be the first to discover the titular Vault of Dragons and capture the dungeon's fabled wealth for themselves. To do this, players are granted a certain number of actions each round, and take turns performing one action at a time, selected from a menu of actions. These are to take more gold, which is needed often to trigger location actions, use their faction's variable player power action, hire followers, move followers from one location to another, initiate fights against other players or NPCs, or explore a dungeon. Followers come in 3 varieties: fighters, rogues, and wizards, cost different amounts to hire, and are used to trigger different location actions, and have various strengths and weaknesses in battle and during dungeon exploration. Dungeon exploration is the main part of the game and features a stack of increasingly difficult dungeon tiles for players to attempt. Players gather a party and roll a certain number and type of dice against a target number. After adding various modifiers, players might be rewarded with loot, cards, or, most importantly, secrets. Once a player has accumulated 3 secrets, they can attempt the Vault of Dragons dungeon, and the player who successfully beats it first is the winner. I was relieved that Vault of Dragons didn't feel like a dungeon crawler, which the description of the game had made me wary of. I'm not generally a fan of that genre, so I was glad that this wound up feeling like something else. It's difficult to pinpoint how the game should be classified as, in fact, and indeed, BGG doesn't list any associated genres or mechanism at the game's page, which is very unusual for any game from a major publisher. If I had to pick, though, due to its ultimate objective and based upon its surprisingly brisk pace, the game really does feel like a race game. There's some nice tension that builds up over the course of the game as players build up their parties, decide how to most effectively split them to gather essential resources, take valuable location actions, and explore dungeons. Thanks to the host of modifiers and the way the different type of dice interact, there is lots of manipulation in the game, which feels very tactical and makes making the final Vault of Dragons roll feel genuinely rewarding and satisfying because players spend so many strategic decisions during the game building up for that. I'm glad this game found its way into my collection. It's a keeper and one my wife has already requested repeated plays of. Since I don't usually devote exclusive space in my What I've Been Playing section to them, and because there have been a lot of really interesting ones released this year, I'm going to spend the next several episodes reviewing some of the many expansions that have come out recently. I'm going to start this week with the Controlled Chaos expansion for Dinogenics, one of the many dinosaur park building games that have come out in recent years. And just like Dinosaur Island, when the creators considered content for an expansion, they thought, oh yeah, marine reptiles, that's the way to go! As you'll recall in my review of the base game, I wound up liking Dinogenics just as much as Dinosaur Island and really appreciated what the game did differently. But does the expansion hold up as well too? Here's how it works. Like Dinosaur Island's Totally Liquid expansion, Controlled Chaos is a modular expansion and adds several different component parts that players can mix and match as they please. But the main focus of the expansion are the new dinosaurs, marine reptiles, and other extinct species. In order to not dilute the DNA deck with too many cards of too many different species, the designers just created an entirely new deck to get the DNA cards of these new guys from, which I thought was very clever and works great because, generally speaking, more worker placement spots are often a good thing. I've always thought the main strength of Dinogenics over Dinosaur Island was how each dinosaur species felt unique because of both their stats and special abilities. The new species reinforces this even more, and they went in a lot of really interesting decisions with these new guys. I'm particularly excited that the Dimetrodon is now a part of the game, and my wife will be happy at the inclusion of a mammoth now. Other modules include the ability to capture dinosaurs in the wild instead of creating them, wild DNA tokens that can be used to fill in the missing parts of a dinosaur DNA card set, large facility tiles that overlap spaces and bring into play additional abilities and point-scoring opportunities, and the Underground Network, which introduces employee cards into the mix. This latter module might be the second most interesting addition the expansion brings. These guys introduce variable player powers and unique endgame scoring objectives, and I found them instrumental in the creation of new successful strategies. All these modules I found easy to add, and in fact I added them all in at once without any difficulty. The new worker placement spots, dinosaurs, and cards are all tons of fun and make an already very replayable and variable game even more so. If there was one weakness to the base game, it was that it was difficult to mount a successful comeback, and the lack of significant endgame points made the ultimate result of the game a foregone conclusion when one or two rounds might still remain. But those Underground Network guys solved both issues, and I've experienced some dramatic comebacks in the game now. Oh, and I should mention the inclusion of a whole plethora of new solo mode scenarios too, at least doubling the quantity that already existed. I've not played through all of the base ones yet, but I'll be all set for quite some time if I choose to delve deeper into this game solo. So all things considered, this is a very successful expansion, both in what it wanted to accomplish and in the entertainment experience it delivered. I will naturally continue to play both Dinosaur Island and Dinogenics in the future, but Controlled Chaos might just tip the scales a little in Dinogenics' favor for me. Well, that will do it for episode 75. Thanks for listening. Feel free to join the Out of the Dust podcast guild at BoardGameGeek.com. Follow the podcast on Twitter at OutOfTheDustBGG. Leave a comment at the guild. PM me on BGG under user handle Radagast14 or user handle AnnLee14. Or email me at radagast14@CenturyLink.net. And join the Out of the Dust conversation yourself at our monthly geek list at BGG. Alright, play me out, Ananda!